Delegate, so can you help us with an opening prayer?
Yes, definitely. I'll help you guys with the prayer this morning. So, yeah, for those today, so I did not again. Good morning. So, we don't know this now. Son, ma, so na in it, the string, the con, the pen be it. It's car, I add on, it's a car, something lean. It is glado, as it is seen. It's a car, and on says, has age, and the car is on that this guy, it's string. And as it is string, it's a car, so be the region. The string is home. The last line is leaning on, it's cut me, that I get home. Yet, even this cut cake in listen, ye could all into churches into it. Yet, a make that. Add on the yard, a ye dash, ye had that ego, ye dash of the need so. At issue ben, he end his tea, Ashani, Asasi, Zinipe, a beck home, yard, a compe. Be Ishando, be hash it eatly. Alla yan hitis khayani te khayala hot eto lisnige hin don we even ye a ya konche to this gon we yan and it not to it and it not the again it and it not the string ya the string but only he care only he ja don't he is ni jane had I don't the ni hinne don hinna don hija don hitsije ni hitsit arche ni het of kaji de like adas ego ya eho ni khawten tla dole adola control ni tan dashkin ni tan ni istra dal toi aj khudili e bab na hidi shinge pe chana ni klidole ve shinge they had a standard utilization is cateada hos etos. I don't that con, can't die so could I eho. So I case to give back in the case or less, even ye could only a sleep or listen of son him. I don't that you're not in his heart. Even if you dream or watch it, you take the way on only. Ni kede be the region do ni ya don't hikige ni hinade so be the region do ni ka ho ishinge ni ya ni na she etana gai ka region do kede ni do wazuna ni Thank you very much. Send back over to you, Chair. Vice Chair.
Akushio kya zona jiben na chikla ni klido. If we could have the task force member identify themselves for the audience, starting with Delegate Autoso.
Definitely, yeah, and banana na kodo. She Autoso, you do na kaid natural hit leaning. Nan she is hop behind, but she don't look at the net. She don't not Jenny either. She not look at it. Mention do. Next is the page one, so uninstalled. That is string the 24th member of the 24th Navajo Nation Council and serve on this task force. Yeah.
Thank you, Delegate. So, Delegate Paul Brigade.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, they've been. I do. Yeah, it should say they're not. So there's a behind the yeah. I do. Another Vice Chair, Honorable Leonard Sosi, yeah, for help me out with running the meeting today. But I think the members of the task force, though, advisory committee, though, is enough staff. Leonard, Julissa, appreciate your help. they delegate Paul McGee, Slapway, partners and Libigatins in Hisha Gado Chi, Tana Boss of a team, baby tour, Ado Tona Heli, a Slappo. That is using in a slip. I don't think a tour initiative that 23 needs to say that I don't care on national level the cynical. Thank you and have a good meeting. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And do we have other task force members on the call? If not, if the advisory committee could identify themselves.
Good morning, Vice Chair. This is Chuck Howe, Shanto Community Member of the Advisory Committee.
Yeah, there, Vice Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, thank you. Other task force members, division directors, other staff, and the advisory committee. My name is Jerry Williams. Touch sheet is slow this sheet. But it's seen if taught the sheet is a trade us nalida. On the way the chi to page tahan style. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Any other advisory member?
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair. This is Michael Anderson calling from Page.
Good morning, Mr. Anderson. Any other advisory member? If not, then do we have other officials on the line?
Good morning, Shananta. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hank Stevens, notice audit, but on in stone, no state upon by chain, not the sheet, the shadow, to the tree, national. So I'd like to thank everybody for being on this call today. And back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Any other officials on the line or advisory member? If not,
Morning.
go
This is
ahead.
Dellard Curley with Naabik'íyáti Chapter, Secretary Treasurer. Éidirné touching national Islam Bashin. Just joining to listen in. Thank you.
Thank you for joining in. Any other official on the line?
Yeah, the Chair. This is Roland Small Canyon.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Shanto Community Governance, Chapter President. Note that touchy in Shlon, she that she to this time that she chedo taban national. Oh, she always inside or like Chair. Thank you for the time. Back to you.
Thank you for joining us. Any other officials wishing to identify themselves? If not, why don't we go to the staff? If they could quickly introduce themselves. Beginning with Ms. Johnson.
Good morning, task force members and advisors and other callers on the Zoom. She Jalissa Johnson, she had the Kiani Bush's chain. Okay, that's a chain. Hanagathni, that's another. Have a good day.
Thank you. Mr. Mose.
Good morning, everyone. Jay Leonard Mose and Shea Twinster Den. Shashin's Long Hanagani Bush's chain. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Thank you. Ms. Khan.
Good morning. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear.
Oh,
That's
great.
Eho.
Wonderful. Yeah, it honors the task force members, members, the advisory committee and staff, support staff, and those who are helping the committee, including Department of Justice and the other department advisors and division advisors on this call. She Mariana Khan, da shijine. Don't and the shinigi a to head leaning the shlip. Bashish chin, ashche dashiche, chens a kinna dashina. I could ask on the ship. I will be on the call listening, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, and members of the Task Force and Advisory Committee. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. Anybody from DOJ?
Hi, good morning. This is Captain Balzowski from Navajo DOJ.
Good morning. Anybody else from DOJ?
Hi, good morning. This is Cynthia Freeman calling from DOJ.
Okay, thank you. Good. Thanks for joining us. Anybody from Economic Development? Anybody from the Washington's office? Do we have any members of the staff of Navajo Nation departments?
This is Eric Stanfield from HHPD. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Vice Chair Sherilyn Yazzie from the Office of the Speaker is on the line.
Thank you for joining us. Anybody else that's a member of the staff for Navajo Nation or other government departments? Okay. Is Mr. Shopman on the line? Melvin Shopman?
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning, because you're part of the report today also. So, okay. Anybody else before we go to the agenda? Anybody else wishing to identify themselves?
Morning. This is Delegate Herman Daniels. I'm on the line. Good morning.
Thank you, Delegate. And good morning. Okay, why don't we turn to the agenda then? I believe they've all been sent out and it's also on the website. So everybody pretty much should have a copy. If we could have a motion to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Vice Chair, would you like me to read the record?
Okay. Thank you, Julissa.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Naabik'íyáti Niłtólí Task Force of the 24th Navajo Nation Council regular meeting via telecommunication, June 3rd at 10 a.m. Proposed agenda. 1, call meeting to order, roll call invocation. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials, 2-minute limit. 3, review and adopt the agenda. 4, review and adopt the journals, May 16, 2022. 5, receive reports. A, update report from the advisory committee. B, update report on the safety concerns regarding Antelope Point Marina and the declining reservoir level of Lake Powell, presented by Chairman Paul Begay Jr. and Mr. Melvin Shopman. 6, old business none. 7, new business. A, discussion regarding a possible meeting with the U.S. Department of Interior and National Park Service Director Charles F. Sams III. 8, close of meeting, announcements and adjournment. The next date will be proposed later on. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Do I have a motion?
Otto, one motion.
Motion by Delegate Otto. Do I have a second?
Second, Chair Begay.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Any amendments? If there are no amendments, Ms. Johnson, can you call the roll?
Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Mose, can I help you with that?
Or Mr. Mose, can you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Morning, everyone. Adopt the agenda. Honorable Paul Begay Jr.
Green.
Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Herman Daniels Jr.
I vote in favor.
Honorable Herman Daniel Jr. votes in favor. Honorable Otto So.
Green.
Honorable Otto So votes green. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Vice Chair, a vote of 3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mose. We have an agenda on a vote of 3-0. I believe we have to adopt a journal dated May 16 for the meeting of May 16. I believe those journals have been sent out to the task force members and others. So do I have a motion to adopt the journal of May 16?
Motion by Otto So.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, this is Daniel.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the journal. Any discussion? If not, Mr. Mose, can you call the roll to adopt the journal?
Honorable Paul Begay Jr.
Green.
Honorable Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Herman Daniels Jr.
I vote green.
Honorable Herman Daniels Jr. votes green. Honorable Otto So.
Vote green.
Honorable Otto So votes green. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Vice Chair, vote of 3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mose. We have adopted the journal on a vote of 3-0. Okay, and then going to 5, receiving reports, update report from the advisory committee. Who from the advisory committees are giving report this morning?
Vice Chair, this is Chuck Howe.
Okay, Mr. Howe, you're recognized to give a report.
All right, thank you, sir. And good morning to everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to continue to be involved in the task to missed the standpoint some of the some of the involvement they've had over the last couple of weeks. The advisors have not met since the last meeting of the task force, but we know there's been a lot of other activities. Certainly some articles. I know Mr. Stanfield and Mr. Floyd Stevens took the annual river trip just recently, and not sure if they have anything else to report from that standpoint. And Mr. Hank Stevens was involved in the tour of the second tour with, I believe, with RDC, and then of course the water rights signing that occurred last Friday. But with that, I don't have anything else. I will pass it on to Mr. Hank Stevens. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Aro Santa, Delegate Gay, Delegate Herman Daniels, and then also Delegate so the people on this call. Just brief update on some of the happenings in San Juan County along the Parcel B lines. On May 26th, we actually conducted another on-site tour with the Lieutenant Governor, Deidre Henderson from the state of Utah. And she brought in 20 other staff members, and including 3 Utah representatives, Hickens, Dave Hickens, Phil Lyman, and Representative Stewart. And we actually toured the same areas that we toured with the Untitled Task Force last year, and she actually did a visual of the proposed road development from Naabik'íyáti to Oljeto. She also looked at the area that was impacted by Lake Powell, some of the sediment that's in the area and some of the vegetation that's starting to grow in the area of where the sediment is. So she was very concerned about the impact and how the Navajo Nation would actually be able to maybe mitigate in the area to the point where they might be able to do some type of agricultural developments. And also she had questions about the Utah water rights as to what kind of developments we might have. Also, she was very concerned about the Navajo Nation's ability to actually continue to prioritize the Naabik'íyáti and Oljeto road and the funding that might be available to actually establish this road. So on the other hand, the state of Utah is pretty much in favor and has already prioritized the development of this road development between Navajo Mountain and Oljeto. So those were some of the questions that she had, and we had invited the Navajo Nation president, but he never did go on the tour with us. But Delegate Herman Daniel was there to provide a lot of the information that the lieutenant governor was asking about, and it was very helpful. And I think she was very she was taken by the some of the answers that Mr. Daniels had. So, and she's actually looking forward to going back to the Monument Valley area for that water rights signing the following day. So, and I wasn't in attendance on that water rights signing, but I think they was only on invitation only basis. So I never did go. So other than that, but I think it was kind of like the highlight of our tours within that parcel B land and some of the impacts that that Lake Powell had actually created. So other than that, the other thing that we might be looking at too is that we did view the area where the two officers were actually where the two bodies were retrieved, and she was very concerned about that, and she was really taken up by the plan of maybe initiating this road development and to commemorate the law enforcement of the Navajo Nation, also the state of Utah. So with that, that's my report on my end. I'll give back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I believe Mr. Stanfield.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Just a couple of brief points. As Mr. Howe mentioned, Floyd Stevens and I were out on the Colorado River for about 10 days on the Adaptive Management Annual Navajo Nation Monitoring Trip. So we're just getting back in the loop. We returned yesterday afternoon. The one, I think, important update I have is that approximately around the last time the task force had a meeting, we sent a request to the National Park Service to compile all of the existing agreements, PAs, MOUs, MOAs, and so forth. There are several, just to ensure that everyone's aware of what the existing agreements are and ensure that they are being complied with. As we've noted in previous meetings, there's the Rainbow Bridge MOU. There's not been a Rainbow Bridge meeting in probably 4 years now. There's also some reporting requirements on an off-road vehicle PA programmatic agreement with the Navajo Nation. on, reporting of the activities, archaeological surveys, and the general implementation of that project. 5 of the accessible shoreline areas do go through the Old Jato and Navajo Mountain area, so it's an important agreement to pay attention to. And then there may be others that potentially we're even unaware of, but having a list of those and keeping track of what the responsibilities are within those will be important. And I have not heard back yet. So that'll be something I'll be looking forward to following up on today, and hopefully reporting to the task force on either compliance or non-compliance with those agreements. And that is all I have for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. Delegate Daniels, do you wish to add on something as part of your trip?
Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Sosi, Mr. Chuck Howe, and also Mr. Henry Stevens Jr. Thank you. Thank you for updating the task force on the trip and also on the signing ceremony, which happened last Thursday and Friday. Yeah, Thursday. Yes, I jumped on the tour. Went into Copper Canyon. Went to Ayut Mesa on the east side. We came in from there, Copper Canyon down. Yes, I rode with Mr. Stevens going on at along with Lieutenant Governor and her staff and representatives. Along the way, he had several questions, and it's a good thing we jumped on board with her. Called it's a good thing that she came down and to look at the area in person. But other representatives, Senator Hinkins, Representative Lyman, the national. So all together we had a group. I would say close to 50, somewhere around there. We did the tour. So I mean, appreciate the presence of Untitled Chapter President, Mr. Roland Small Canyon. He was also part of the tour. I invited Mr. Small Canyon. The reason being is because where the proposed road is going to be, that where the proposed road, the service area, Old Jato, Shanto service area, and also Naabik'íyáti service area. So there's the 3 communities that are involved in this the planning and also the communication. So it was a good tour. That day was a good day. Also, it was calm, no wind, but the heat was there. But the next day, yes, the signing ceremony. It was a invitees day and day. So it was like over 100 people that attended the signing ceremony, and it was at the Monument Valley Welcome Center. Other than that, what Mr. Stevens alluded to, and also yes, along the way, grade when we went into Copper Canyon. I mean, what's that? Senator, Donan representative, and also Lieutenant Governor. We up at the national coast the area, the Copper Canyon, and also the Paiute Mesa where the road is going to be. And also on the tour was Jones and the Mail Engineering. So I think so. So the two alignments where the road is, the proposed road is going to be. Again, the cost difference between the two proposed routes again. So it is that I just want to update you, the task force, and also the people that are on the line. So it is Mr. Vice Chair. I just want to say thank you again to the Mr. Stevens and also Untitled Chapter officials and Mr. Small Canyon, and others. And also Office of the Speaker, Mr. Donovan Handley. I know that's the only person that came down from Wonder Rock. Office of the Speaker there, but we didn't have anyone from the President's office. Mr. Vice Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Do we have any questions for the presenters? If not, Vice Chair has a question. On Mr. Daniels, you said something, and I think Mr. Stevens too, you said something about the agriculture or the plants coming back along the river where you did the tour. Is there a project, an agricultural project along the San Juan River or the Colorado River as part of the Utah settlement in the Utah portion?
Chair, this is Hank. Maybe I can answer that question. We did take a young lady from San Juan County out there. She's from the Utah State University, and she works with Navajos here in San Juan County and also Naabik'íyáti and Shantou. What we actually mentioned was that there were different scenarios in the road development, and one was that permit holders, how we might be impacting the area of the grazing land of these permit holders, and how we can actually maybe mitigate and come to terms on how we can actually provide some type of range land management plan into the area, because most likely when we build this highway, you're going to have a right-of-way fence on both sides, on the north side and the south side of this highway. So from there, we can actually connect this fence into the shorelines of the San Juan River and actually provide some type of acreage for pasture land, and most likely eradicating plants that are actually invading the area alongside the shorelines. And then also within that too is that actually introducing some type of agricultural development for the local community and the chapters, or like alfalfa or grass hay, and also maybe vegetables like corn, melons, and squashes and whatnot, to where we can introduce this agricultural development to actually sustain the community and the chapters. So that was one. And then the other thing too is that we saw a lot of animals out there, especially donkeys. And what used to be the horsepower of the Navajo people at one time, for plowing, and some of these animals were actually being used for migrations from the lower and the upper elevations, during the year. And Reagan is actually the one that kind of shed some light on this as to how we can actually, or how we have actually forsaken these animals that at one time we used to use them for our daily tasks and chores, around the farm, and then even during the migration times, and how we can actually maybe put a plan together to where we can save some of these animals, and maybe put an adoption plan together for these animals, so they're not just being eliminated from the land. So that was another issue that we had. The other thing too was the infrastructures, the broadband, the water rights that we have acquired from the federal government now. How we can utilize this water and some of the infrastructure, and how we can actually implement the whole infrastructures alongside the highway, to where we can actually accommodate the community of Shonto, Naabik'íyáti, Navajo Mountain, and Ojeto with some of these development, and some of the farmlands that are up in the dry areas of Paiute Mesa. So those are some of the things that we also mentioned. And the other thing too is that tourism, the area is very nice, and with the highway would actually be impeding on the scenery of the area. But on the other hand, how do we actually control the people on these roads, where they can't just jump off anywhere and roam the areas off the highway? So those were some of the things that we were now talking about too, how we can actually come to terms with minimizing the impact of the area with the highway, but also that we might put in a bicycle lane or a walking lane adjacent to the highway, to where, if we needed to do some type of bike-a-thon or walk-a-thons, or, any type of these outdoor activities, we're able to do these things on these alongside the road and all that. So, and then to continue to support the Navajo Nation, with these croplands in the area, was kind of some of the things that Reagan actually talked on. So we will actually continue to talk on this. We have a meeting on the 27th, I believe, up in Monticello with Jones and DeMille. So what we're contemplating is that we're going to actually go on Google Earth. We want to take a real good look at the overall alignment of the road, and see where the right-of-way fence is going to be, and how we can institute the pasture lands, and how we can actually incorporate some of these fences. And then when we do that, I think the grazing officials from all 4 chapters have to be involved in this, and also BIA, because some of the permit holders are stagnant with their ability to actually provide their own conservation plan. And that's something that's really is a concern for the permit holders, because they're not able to provide these conservation plans because they don't know how to do a conservation plan. But this would actually be a jump start on how the Knox region would actually be the front runner on these conservation plans, to where we can actually institute that into the Navajo Nation as time progresses along. So it's kind of like a prototype plan that we might be putting together. So, and then also identifying some of the people that were in the area. There's a lot of sites in the area that has to be protected, and with that, there's certain vegetations in the area too that we have to look at and actually determine what species of plants were in the area and whatnot for some of our practitioners and also for our herbalists from the Navajo Nation. So these are studies that are actually taking place, and I believe when we had our Twinspola Task Force tour, I think the following day we went back out there and we actually did some soil samples. So we're actually putting these plans together right now, and hopefully by year's end, we should actually have a grant proposal and probably funding for this project, so we can initiate the whole project, through the Navajo Nation Department of Natural Resource, and hopefully they can come on board with us, and also the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So, like I said, there's so many scenarios, and when we start talking about this, I think there's going to be maybe about 6 or 8 objectives that actually pertains to the route, and not only just the scenic area, the vegetation, the animals, and all that, but also how we can incorporate a commemoration of our law enforcement that have lost their lives, on duty. So that's another scenario that we have to look at too. So with that, that's kind of a brief update on what we might be looking at when we start looking at the route development. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Do we have any other questions for the presenters? If not, do I have a motion to? Oh, Mr. Daniels?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, and Mr. Vice Chair. Yeah, I don't know. Appreciate the discussion here. The update, and also the other, I believe, was last month, a month and a half ago, I went up to Salt Lake City, Utah, for the Utah Tribal Leaders Meeting. That's where we give a report, update report to other tribes, the 7 other tribes in Utah. With us, with the Navajo Nation, there's 8 tribes in Utah. I gave a report on what we're doing here in Utah, and also the issues and concerns that we're facing. The Utah Tribal Leaders Meeting, and also at the Utah Governor's Summit. During that time, I gave a report. I don't know what we're talking about today. The proposed road project from Ojeto to Naabik'íyáti, or I just gave a brief report. I don't know. At the end, one of the leaders, the tribal leaders from the San Juan Southern Paiute tribe, Councilwoman Louise Tallman, San Juan Southern Paiute tribe, but I just told her that I can give an update to the tribe on what we're planning, and also on what we're doing on this side. So So I think the reason why she asked that question is because Navajo, not the that's where they're located, the San Juan Southern Paiute tribe. I don't know when this road is built, they're going to be utilizing this road to go out towards Monument Valley to get to Blanding or other areas. What they call. So it is a bit not to snake called I don't know I don't know just vice versa. Intermarriage. As has uncle at the end of the snake was the Nenda snake that the snake neck but Kodona Gaita moving forward, Kodona Gaita, I believe Kodona Gaita, since they mentioned since they asked the question Kodona Gaita about why come they're not being informed, what come they're not being part of this. Shall we, moving forward, in our meetings, not in our meetings, but maybe a separate meeting with them, so we give an update to the San Juan Southern Paiute tribe in front of Abantas case obviously Jacko. None that it's just a dog gosh or you quite your bosses. Because same with the task force because that on there. A base granada and it it's like a little hard to have season. It's just a dog gosh. A quite your bosses period. Not even not the snake. So I believe we think Oban first case although Bisnay, Mr. Nana Kissenday, Mr. Big and so a bubble band this case or so Kodona Gaita, I know there's the Treaty of 2000 is a base of that. There's got the hostile so not one meter to Aja. 8 years ago, but the needs did. But the road project, the Kodosha Nada, again, the Glen Canyon Recreation Area. So it is also Baja Street on the called Nevada up in Salt Lake City. It will be the national day kito yet. I should get updated to the case between the call. I'm willing to work with you. I don't know. I have a good working relationship with that tribe. The council members done Denigi, Mr. Gray Mountain, and Ms. Tallman, and others, yellow hair that so in the way that to the city, just that they not only done that. I got to know a dash, you're about that. So it is additionally the next issue in your day. So what echo without them, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Daniels. I think those are good points, and I'm pretty sure the Chairman McKay is taking notes, and I leave it to his discretion to either put it on the agenda or schedule a meeting to discuss the matters you raise. Go on, Jonah. Thank you. Any other questions for the presenters? If not, do I have a motion to adopt the reports of the presenters?
Mr. Vice Chair.
Is this Mr. Williams?
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Not a question, but a comment on the task force and also the advisory. And I brought this up before. The way that if you Washington, then he didn't need this be his army be kehoda and ako late to jota lebe ishan elneta obe unfit no be khade tane the quadrilateral agreement ako oban sa keso oban ses keso be no ho partial b in founded that's don't the tunnel anigi tota hidegi water level that's been holding cut late that on since the man says kiss the way the way that but hanegi Johnny he got quaggy sigi been get task force in the yard been getting the land is late or state now for the season okay it on in Zinigi they anhito na ro na khidashin khana det on which it as a whole this ho ako khalit ya when the deal is council does the task force ako khalit ya zo da len ishan do this but not zero na hit ado this نخاش الياغ شو اني كودون خاندت انتي سيكات تونل انج if you don't need I don't think 3728 and water line tunnel under which that also even holdni khandet and he don't need an jondol what are you in the hub the way that by that pigi it seen do that le that hegi jono go ya te hob na ta do le ni jojo ko di kuchi kat dum ye sani le hegi di be nani la hit khayla bit hat o sila khayla nabit o sila okay there da hundishti wena die kwai tatski von khas gedon khas ya und o are lat agi bayat ki injono be on nisako ado da bi na don the shot khode so ado eta no so si don't lead to nel anje if dan skadi ad be ba hot to ad san dan skada no ya das piece over so ide ya be hanade vice chair ado task force members advisory ado ade das no strong do yeah thank you
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And it's a comment on his concerns regarding whether Navajo Nation now has some rights to the shoreline, or are we still at the 3720 level? And then he's concerned about the quadrilateral agreement. This is Vice Chair Sosi. I believe what we could do is, I think it's about time, maybe we start putting a report together to the Naabik'íyáti committee and discuss some things with them on how we go forward. The task force has had some good meetings and has developed some PowerPoints. So maybe it's time we go back to Naabik'íyáti committee and update them. And then at that time, maybe even request the next steps of what you're talking about, Mr. Williams. To my knowledge, I think the authority of the Navajo Nation is still at 3720. But maybe Ms. Balzowski could chime in and update us on it. Ms. Balzowski?
Hi, Vice Chair. This is Catherine Bolzowski. I'm sorry, I apologize. I missed your question. I know you were talking about creating a report
Mr.
for
Williams
Navi.
Yeah. Mr. Williams' question is, since the level of the lake has gone down, is the Navajo Nation following that level? And he even mentioned that some people are, I guess, using the water or herding sheep to that level now. That's new to me, but are they quote unquote trespassing? And so where is the line still? I think that's his question. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I guess the Navajo Nation boundary still is set by the 1958 legislation, which is our favorite elevation line. So that's still where the nation's land starts and the NPS land begins. So that hasn't changed with the lowering of the lake levels. Thank you.
Okay, and then his other question is quadrilateral agreement, and they're still deemed to have expired. Is that correct? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That is correct. Their agreements still are expired. So my understanding is that talking with some of the Navajo Nation departments, at least with DED, is that there has been discussion about creating new agreements for individual projects, or, like a park or a business site lease. So I think some of the programs may be in discussion with the National Park Service about putting forth new agreements for their individual projects. But to my knowledge, I haven't heard any discussions about a new quadrilateral agreement, and the current one still continues to be expired.
Thank you, Ms. Balzowski. Any other questions from the task force members? If not, do I have a motion to adopt the reports?
Chair, this is Hank. I do have a question for Mr. Lofsky.
Mr. Stevens, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. My question is that, when we look at elevation 3720, okay, that's kind of like a sacred line, I guess you might call it. So we had just had an incident here last week with a rock fall there in Lake Powell. How does the Department of Justice perceive this incident? Did we just lose land above the 3720 below that sacred line of 3720 into Lake Powell? And if so, how do we actually approach the National Park Service on some of these issues? At the same token, the Navajo Mountain community has lost land into Lake Powell that's above the 3720. And this is still an issue here at Navajo Mountain. So we're actually losing grazing land here versus the rockfall, there in Lake Powell. Even though it's just a slab of rock, we're looking at that sacred 3720 line. We're actually losing land, regardless of it just being a rock fall or whatnot. But within Navajo Mountain, we do have land that has fluffed into Lake Powell that was originally above the 3720. So, during the time that we actually started talking about the quadrilateral agreement, we have actually taken Department of Justice to actually review some of these areas. And in some of these areas, some of these rock falls are actually on some of the ancestral trails that actually went across the San Juan River. So we still have yet to get an answer from the Department of Justice as how they actually perceive the loss of land above the 3720 and the deterioration of our ancestral trails. So that would be my question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Ms. Brzezowski?
Thank you, Vice Chair. The 30, so it, you know, just pursuant to the 58 legislation, all land above 3720 remains Navajo Nation land. All land below 3720 is either NPS land or Bureau of Reclamation land or whatever federal agency has gotten jurisdiction over the area at issue. But 3720 up Navajo Nation, 3720 below federal agency of some sort. In regards to moving forward, you know, and I think what we probably want to do and what the quadrilateral agreement gave us a certain ability to do is have access to land below 3720, even though we don't know it's not, you know, quote unquote Navajo Nation land. It's still allowed Navajos to have access. And I think really that's kind of what's, you know, some of this we haven't, I haven't had that discussion in the context of advising DED. I'm not sure if DNR has had any discussions with parks about, you know, granting access, having Navajos having access to land below 3720. I defer to Dr. Shabala on that, but you know, that's kind of what we would look for is negotiating, you know, until the land, you know, until I know that there's been talk about having that land below 3720 returned to the Navajo Nation. And until that time, you probably want to negotiate some sort of access agreement that allows individuals for, you know, Navajos to have access to the water, which I would say is not, you know, it shouldn't be unheard of. NPS has access agreements with other tribes throughout the country that grants them access to sacred sites or, you know, lands within national parks that those tribes claim some sort of connection to. So if that's what the Navajo Nation is interested in, that could be a route that we could take, is negotiating basically an access agreement for Navajos.
Thank you, Ms. Brzezowski. I see Mr. Stanfield's hand raised. Mr. Stanfield?
Hi, yeah, I can respond to a couple of things that Hank mentioned. The first thing is in terms of adverse impacts to what would, you know, ancestral or archaeological resources. The way to address that, I think, within the national park is first to, you know, understand the level of documentation of those sites. If they have not been documented, have them documented, and then further, if they're being impacted by undertakings of the federal government, so Bureau of Reclamation or National Park Service, then, you know, discuss mitigative activities that can take place on those. And, you know, there's I think a pretty wide range of things that can be considered mitigations to adverse impacts to archaeological sites. So that's the first thing. The second thing on use is that there is the National Park Service at Glen Canyon has a traditional use memo. I don't think it's exactly an agreement within the tribe because it applies to all tribes, but it states that the National Park Service will allow access for traditional uses, and that's a very broad range of things. It can include ceremonial activities. I believe even swimming is on there. I don't think it directly addresses, you know, livestock grazing. That might bring up some interesting kind of land use issues. So I would think, you know, as it stands, you know, traditional activities that would certainly fit into that, but negotiating any kind of a new agreement would bring in the complication of what impacts livestock grazing would have within the recreation area. So that could be a complicated thing to address if it needed to be beyond what the regulations already allow, which is just very generally stated traditional uses such as ceremonial activities and fishing and swimming and things like that. So hopefully that information is helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Stanfield. I guess the chair is still on the line. It's interesting though that I think what I heard is that some of the Navajo Nation Department may be negotiating a quadrilateral-like agreements with NPS, pretty much without the knowledge of the task force. Maybe down the road we could put on the agenda on which departments are pursuing quadrilateral-like agreements with NPS, but maybe for another day. So this is something to alert us to. Thank you. I believe we could go to the next report now. Do I have a motion to adopt the reports by the presenters?
No,
task
sir.
force members?
Daniel, yes, sir.
Motion by Delegate Daniels and second by Delegate Autoso to adopt the reports. Any comments? If not, Mr. Mose, can you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Honorable Paul Begay Jr.
Green.
Honorable Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Herman Daniels Jr.
Green.
Honorable Herman Daniels Jr. votes green. Honorable Otto So.
I vote green.
Honorable Otto So votes green. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Vice Chair voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mose. We've adopted the reports. Going on our agenda, the next report is an update report on the safety concerns regarding the Antelope Point Marina and the declining reservoir level of Lake Powell, presented by Chairman Begay and Mr. Melvin Shopman. I don't know if Mr. Begay or Chairman Begay is in a condition to give report, but we could go to Mr. Shopman. Chairman Begay, what do you think?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I did speak with the Shopman, and he should be ready to give us an update on what has happened since our last meeting, and basically probably need a quick summary, quick update on what has changed or transpired since the last meeting that we had. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Before we start, I just want to state that the President, Nez, and Speaker Damon signed the joint letter that was put together after these concerns were brought to the Navajo Nation leadership. And the letter is addressed to Mr. Schott of NPS, with copies going to Director Sam and also to Department of Interior. So I guess Ms. Yazzie, Chief of Staff Yazzie for Speaker Damon is on the line. Maybe just before, as introduction, maybe we should let the audience know. Ms. Yazzie, are you still on the line? Has the letter been sent?
Good morning, Vice Chair. The Office of the Speaker is finalizing cover letters to this, and we will be sending them out here momentarily. We have at least 8 letters that are going out to congressional leaders. We're working in partnership with Mr. Carlisle Begay, who is also on the line. So that is presently what we're working on as well. We have been made aware of a meeting that's going to be occurring next Tuesday. We will also hand deliver this information directly to congressional leaders. But that is where we at this point with the letters and the cover letters.
Thank you, Ms. Yazzie. When the letter is sent off, we'll get copies to the task force members and the advisory committee so they're aware of it. I assume that's when it'll become public.
Yes, I'm sorry for the interruption, Vice Chair. May I speak?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, as soon as we get those letters finalized and signed off by Speaker Damon in terms of the cover letters, we'll definitely scan and PDF them to Jalissa and to provide her the opportunity to distribute to the task force members. And in addition to that, we will be sending another media advisory as we are working diligently to ensure that this very topic, which is extremely important to the Office of the Speaker, gains momentum in regards to this very important project. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Yazzie. With that, we'll go to Mr. Shopman.
Thank you, Vice Chair, Chairman, and Task Force members, Advisory Committee. Since we met last, I'm sorry, can you hear me, Vice Chair?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. To continue then, the access for through the gangway by the pedestrians and the carts that haul the pedestrians, permission was received to go ahead with that improvement, but it was just received a few weeks ago, and they knew that it was going to take 3 months to do. So essentially, it's not, I mean, the peak season for the marina, is typically Memorial Day weekend to Labor Day weekend. And so it's, 3 months out because we're waiting on the contractor to be able to schedule us now. Whereas had they approved it back even in March, then we would have had it for the season. The contractor had already committed to do it. But anyway, so we do have that, but it's too late. But anyway, we're still moving forward with that because of purely the safety issue of that access. Antelope Point continues to lose customers in the dry storage, which not only results in loss of revenue for Antelope Point, it also loss of Navajo taxes. And then rental boats are canceling because the people can't come and launch their little boat to go with the rental houseboat and things like that, because of the having to drive the additional distance to Wall-Weep, launch there through after hours of wait, and then drive back to Antelope, and then go out on the lake, drive back to Wall-Weep, launch, and then wait again to retrieve your boat. People just don't have the time, so they're canceling. Basically, these delays that have been forced and enhanced by the low water have created an unnecessary hardship on both the general visiting public and Antelope Point customers. We currently, in order to access the dock at all, had to build a temporary dock that is accessed through our launch ramp, because we can't lodge boats on it because we weren't allowed to improve that. We still haven't got approval on that. But that temporary dock actually dock locks, I believe, 28 boats in their slip. So we have to disassemble that dock that allows the people access to the marina. we have to actually disassemble that temporarily to let those boats in or out of their slip, which is at a hardship, and also depending on if a crisis happened during that time could compound the safety issues of the situation. There's also an extreme need for slips to meet the current needs of the public because of those delays caused through not allowing the improvements, because all of these boats that typically would have been pulled back into dry storage can't be, and the people aren't running them back to Wauweep for half a day, and so there's not enough dock space, and the request for slips so far has been denied. So, you know, basically the good news on the deal is the water has come up about 8 feet since our last meeting, but unfortunately we need about twice that before we can launch or access what we're at. But anyway, I was encouraged to be brief, so Vice Chair, that is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Shopman. Chairman McGay, do you wish to add anything?
Vice Chair, I think Mr. Shopman covered most of it. Thank you.
Okay, and then just, I guess, for those on the call, I think a lot of this has been put together in the joint letter. And I guess we'll just wait for the reaction from Mr. Schott and also from Mr. Sam after the letters are sent out. And then, of course, based on what Ms. Yazzie said, as soon as the Speaker's office sends those out, the staff member, Ms. Johnson, will get the copy and distribute them to the task force member. Thank you. Are there any questions by the task force members?
Mr. Vice Chair, can you hear me? This is Speaker.
Yes. Oh, Speaker. Yate.
Oh, Yate.
Good to hear you. You have the floor.
Good to hear your voice too, Vice Chair. And to Chairman and all the members on the call, I just want to reassure that the Speaker's office is finalizing those letters right now, and putting the as much pressure as we can to get a formal one-on-one discussion with the Mr. Shaw in order for us to go ahead and finalize what we need to do in really trying to understand what the Park Service is doing and the direction from Department of Interior on this. So I know that I just want to thank the members, and thank you to everyone there who's helped assist in the process and really trying to move this forward. So just the reassurance, Mr. Vice Chair, and all the members that we will get those out. Those are on the priority listing. We did have a staff meeting, and I just want to say thank to Tommy Sosi, who's not on the line today. Fortunately, he has a loss in his family, and he's the one that actually completed that litter and made sure that that was something to get done. But I really want to reassure the committee members that this is a high priority from our office, Mr. Vice Chair. Just again, thank you, Kat.
Thank you, Speaker. When Speaker speaks, you know, the earth moves. Okay, I was going to say, well, I better not. Thank you, Speaker, and it's good to hear you. The only other thing, too, Speaker, is I'm pretty sure Chairman McGay will be sending you a request for a report to the Naabik'íyáti committee, too, at some time. I think it's time we go back to Naabik'íyáti and inform them about the activities of the task force member. But we appreciate it, and I guess we'll look to your guidance in meeting with Mr. Schott on the one-on-one, and we'll wait for a response from your office, Speaker. Thank you. Do I have any other questions for the presenters? Any questions from the advisory committee? I hope I'm not speaking to myself. Are we still on the call? I don't hear anything.
Yes,
Yes,
Vice
we
Chair,
can hear.
Vice Chair.
Sorry. Do I have any questions for the presenters? If not, do I have a motion to adopt the reports?
Motion, Daniel.
Motion by Delegate Daniels, second by Chairman McGee. Any comments? If there are no comments, Mr. Mose, can you call the roll?
Sir. Honorable Paul Begay Jr.,
Green.
Honorable Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Herman Daniels Jr.,
Green.
Honorable Herman Daniels Jr. votes green. Honorable Otto So,
Otto So texts me saying that he's going to vote green via text.
Honorable Otto So votes green via text. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr., Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Vice Chair voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mose, and we have adopted the report. Item B. Old business, we have none, and we go on to the discussion regarding a possible meeting with U.S. Department of Interior and National Park Director Charles Sand. Based on Speaker Damon's comment just a while ago, maybe I'd like to hear from the task force member that should we defer to the speaker to schedule this meeting and then invite us to that meeting rather than the task force doing it? I think it'll be better if the Speaker Damon and his office invites Mr. Sam along with the president, since they have a joint letter to them. What is the wish of the task force?
Vice Chair, this is Daniel.
Delegate Daniels, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good I could have behind Vicky could have the speaker Kagan thought. I'll have about this kid without that behind Vicky that without that Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you.
And thank you, Delegate Daniels. And Chairman Begay, should we allow the speaker to take care of this issue for us and then invite Mr. Sams and then have the speaker invite the task force to that meeting? What do you think, Chairman Begay?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members of the Task Force Advisory Board staff, I agree with my brother, Honorable Delegate Herman Daniels. I think if the invitation comes from a higher level, as far as office, like Speaker and the OPVP, have them facilitate the meeting and just get invited. I think that would be have more push to what we're trying to do. So I would agree with having the speaker or even a joint cooperation with OPVP to establish a meeting so that we can join in and get some goals and things discussed on this matter. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to take care of this business item, I think it'll be appropriate to do it by directive to the Speaker's office, to have his office take the lead in inviting Mr. Sams. Do I hear Delegate Aroso?
Yes. The other thing in this discussion, I think we should possibly look at having a discussion on a lawsuit. With just to have, I think that should be more of a internal discussion with the Department of Justice. Just due to the fact that the quadrilateral agreement had expired. There were some attempts before then, Navajo Nation to reach out to the the Recreation, the Department of Interior, and so forth. But the agreement had expired, and there was no attempt from the federal government side to really reach out to the nation, say, hey, and so forth. But what I'm getting to is that out of these agreements that the nation came into, agreed upon, was with the development of Glen Canyon and that's what brought up the shoreline, the elevation, or put the elevation line in place to make that our Navajo Nation boundary line. And it was enacted by Congress. And I think that although it is it's probably a public law, but I think in order to turn over a public law, we might have to start looking at the courts, because before the public law, the boundary was in the middle of the channel. And yes, we can go ahead and try to, be really nice and go to Washington, D.C. and wag our tails over there and hope that Congress may have a whole different heart. But whether they're Republicans or Democrats, but and you just look at the current policy, the current administration, really no, at the national level, no major Indian policy that has been overturned or changed benefit American Indian communities. Washington. And I think in order for the Navajo Nation to stand its ground and moving forth, I think that the consultations that happened at the time of discussion of moving the shoreline or the elevation, moving the boundary line to an elevation line, the communication between the federal government and the Navajo Nation was not really conveyed. I guess the consultation. I think that we were cheated out then. At the same time, there's the issue of Peabody Coal. There is an issue of NGS to be built there. And the amount of resources the Navajo Nation has provided to the valley, building Phoenix to what it is today, moving water, moving Colorado River, moving electric down to the valley to move Colorado River water through the main channels down in Phoenix. Washington, Dito hadit ego ta inasi di yiso to hadit ada choho inikito hitet ano. I think we have to start possibly looking at a possible lawsuit. And we really need to have that discussion with the administration, the president, the vice president, and his men in armor over there at the executive branch, though, because the legislative branch. It's still, although our attorney general, what are the possibilities? Because bottom line is right now with the Colorado agreement being expired, and I think back on what Williams talked about. Does that give the what type of opportunities or what these economic opportunities vanish, it's like a oasis in the desert later, or a mirage. That mirage that was put in place once the Colorado agreement has failed, was not renewed. That agreement, that mirage went away. The federal government created that mirage. So I think that's another discussion that we need to have, because Washington, what Washington, look on and leaning at it, and he just out. I don't know. I can't hear she going that stay what baby got the whole what the trade up in it be Nazla. Outside that job, but here and there. Realistically, if you look at the current Congress, no major Indian policy that has been overturned to change the livelihood of Indian nations across the United States. And I don't see hope in this Congress. Mark Kelly, but up in next, I Ani, Lee Washington, the Annas, Milito, at the year done his. Oh, you look at it, it's 2 years into the administration, the Biden administration, Harris administration. No, you just basically look at things, normal things, tax policy, Trump era tax that were put in place. Again, I see they're still in place, and that tells you that the Congress and the administration in Washington don't want to change it. We know that those policies would impact Indian communities, American Indian communities. I see maybe I'm talking way out there in the flower fields, but I think we have to move towards some sort of legal action to get the government's attention, because I see these opportunities in that area for development. And maybe by the lawsuit, they could give us more assistance there. This concessionaire, the audit, that's in that's in Washington, Jelini. Oh, what happened? Only that is in. Oh, I don't know. I didn't know. I can't. I need to. Top back at that don't know. He does didn't. Oh, what happened? But again, thank you very much, Chair, Vice Chair, and Chairman. This is my recommendation. What abenish? At it and to lean. But I see I did as it I did what I hear from the executive branch again. I would really like to see what the president's views are pertaining to this matter, because on the I guarantee you, if you flip through the journals, you probably didn't have the president in one of these meetings, and it really makes me think about things and makes me have concerns. And I just would like to thank you guys very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Delegate. So what I'm thinking is Vice Chair, that maybe we have that as an option in the discussion with Naabik'íyáti, because it requires the use of Navajo Nation resources. And I think, and then of course you sit on that committee, and I think we'll have a good discussion on it, whether it's open or an executive session. Chances are it'll be an executive session because you're talking about a legal action. So something that I would recommend you keep in the back of your mind, and we'll as we go forward to Naabik'íyáti on how we can approach what you're talking about. But thank you, Delegate. But going back to item 7A, may I recommend that we do this by directive, asking the Office of the Speaker to invite Director Charles F. Sams III and the National Park Service Director and the Department of Interior, so that we could have a discussions regarding the issues out at Lake Powell. I have Delegate Daniels and Chairman McGay recommending that. So maybe a motion for a directive, and then by the directive, then I as the Vice Chair will take the lead to send an email to the Speaker and his Chief of Staff requesting assistance regarding 7A, item 7A. What is the
Vice
task
Chair.
force? Yes, Delegate. So
Vice Chair, let's go ahead and take a vote on the main motion. Then usually the directives happen after the main motion, after the report.
Okay.
Let's do it that way. Okay. Thank you.
Well, the problem I have is there was no report on 7A. That was going to be a discussion on how we were going to invite the Department of Interior and National Park Service. And that's why I was recommending a directive. So, but if I could have a motion on a directive, we could begin discussing it.
I will motion that. Also.
Okay, Delegate So makes a motion to do a directive to Office of the Speaker office to assist us with having a meeting with U.S. Department of Interior National Park Service Director. And we'll ask the Speaker to invite the task force member at the time of that discussion. Do I have a second?
Vice Chair, I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a motion and second to do a directive to Office of the Speaker. Any discussion? If not, Mr. Mose, can you call the roll to adopt the directive?
Yes, sir. Honorable Paul Begay Jr.
Green.
Honorable Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Herman Daniels Jr.
Green.
Honorable Herman Daniels Jr. votes green. Honorable Otto So.
I vote green.
Honorable Otto So votes green. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Vice Chair voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mose. So we've adopted the directive, and Vice Chair Sosi will be responsible for sending the directive to Speaker's Damon's office. Thank you. I believe we're at item 8, close of meeting announcement and adjournment. Do I have any announcement? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion by Alderman
Okay. Motion by Delegate So. Do I have a second?
Second, Vice Chair.
Second by Chairman Begay. I want to thank for everybody being on the call. Sorry, before doing so, if I could recognize Mr. Mike Anderson, he had his hand raised before we adjourn. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Vice Chair and members online. Actually, the comment that I was going to make was actually addressed already. I believe Delegate Daniels had addressed it. So, and I would just offer, let us be cautious to actions that are being done. It seems like history has shown that the National Park Service tends to implement policy or restrictions in our terms when we are dealing with elections. Dare I say, a lame duck. But it seems that the National Park Service tends to take advantage of those times and implement policies and procedures that then tend to be against Native communities, especially the Navajo Nation. So with that, I appreciate. Thank you. Back on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And we have a motion to adjourn. Motion
Mr.
and a
Vice
second.
Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, this is Mariana Khan.
Ms. Khan, before we vote on the adjournment, go ahead.
I don't know if you've already, I didn't hear any discussion of the setting the next meeting date. And then,
go ahead.
And then also the second point is to talk, I guess for the next meeting, to put on the agenda the need to prepare the report to the Naabik'íyáti committee as an action item, or how to assemble the materials for such a presentation, which I suggest would be through written report and through PowerPoint presentation. Mr. Vice Chair and Mr. Chair and members of the task force, I suggest maybe putting that on the next agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. I think to the next meeting, we'll leave that to the call of the Chairman Begay. He's usually good about notifying everybody on when we want to do that. The second is, I agree that I think let's start getting ready to prepare the Naabik'íyáti written report to the Naabik'íyáti committee. And so we can have a discussion with them on the next step, and even invite the president to join us maybe at that meeting based on what Delegate So said. So I appreciate that. And Ms. Johnson, I believe, is still on the line, our advisor, and we'll probably take note of that. And then I guess we all need to, if the task force member and the advisory committee, if we could maybe write some things up that we could put together, start putting together as a written report, because we've discussed a lot. But I appreciate that, Ms. Khan. So we'll need to get ready for that.
Mr. Sosi, Vice Chair, request to speak.
Is this Ms. Yazzie?
Yes, it is. My apologies.
Okay, go ahead.
The Office of the Speaker, based on a recent meeting in going out to Antelope Point Marina, and on the previous meeting, we had indicated that we would begin the discussions or the format for the presentation to the Naabik'íyáti committee. We did submit a very rough draft to Ms. Julissa Johnson by way of Mr. Kyron Hardy to send out to the task force to review and provide recommendations to the PowerPoint that we are preparing for the task force at this time. So if you can provide feedback on the PowerPoint that you all received in PDF this morning, it would be greatly appreciated. We did send it out to Mr. Melvin last evening by Kyron. And it basically gives an overview of Antelope Point Marina, and in reviewing it, we've made inclusive photos of the location, a timeline historically of all the policies pertaining to Antelope Point Marina, and transitioning into where we're at today. One area that we still need to include are the recommendations. Mr. Ottoso provided one recommendation that will be inclusive, and that would be the pros and cons of the quad agreement and the expiration of it. The pros would be, or the cons would be, most likely not to re-enter to the quadrilateral agreement for the purposes of the tax the tax funding that the Navajo Nation was left out on, and the state of Arizona and Utah did capitalize on the taxes being received under the quad agreement. So with that said, based on the review of all of the public laws beginning from 1956 from Chairman Paul Jones to date with the expiration of the quad agreement, we respectfully request those on the task force, as well as any key stakeholders who could provide factual information as well as recommendations. We would like to get this finalized no later than, and as I stated at the last meeting, that we were working on this aggressively in terms of one, the press release that we did get out as soon as possible. Second, we made the visit out there so we could get all hands on deck and understanding the viewpoint from the Navajo Nation. So based on that is the PowerPoint that Mr. Kyron Hardy worked with our office in completing. And again, this is a rough draft on this. And however, we want the task force's recommendations, as well as DOJ and as well as OLC, and what the next steps would be in presenting this to the Naabik'íyáti committee. We really would like for this to be done. I know that we're looking at having possibly Naabik'íyáti next Thursday, or I think this would be a good time to submit to NABI during that time. But again, this would mean that we would all have to provide contributions to this PowerPoint that we have from the task force. So I believe that Ms. Julissa Johnson did email the PowerPoint to each of you. And we would appreciate that if you would like to provide recommendations, and I'll add that to the end of the PowerPoint where it says pros and cons, and recommendations. If you could label your recommendations as recommendations, if you want to include, say, for example, under slide 6, where it has public law 84-856, if you have something inclusive that you want to put in there, be very specific to say, I would like this recommendation or this information to be included under slide 6 under 1958 PL 85-868, or and that's just one example, or maybe slide 8 under PL 92-583, this information. That would be beneficial. That would be greatly appreciated. The purpose of why we're drafting the timeline and how we have the PowerPoint formatted is, one is to provide an educational PowerPoint to council, to give them a historical timeline on where we started and how we ended up today, and the symbolism behind each of the public laws that were signed into law, and what the pros and cons were of each of them, and at the end provide the best recommendation we possibly can, One would be to, again, one possible recommendation again would be what Delegate Otto stated in terms of possibly suing DOI. 2, going to DC. 3, so we would establish our immediate, our short, and our long-term goals on where this task force would like to go and what the recommendations would be to the Naabik'íyáti committee in moving forward for this. And I believe that's what Ms. Mariana Khan was referring to. So our office again stands ready to ensure that we get this this PowerPoint presentation complete with all necessary information and recommendations to present to Naabik'íyáti, as well as identifying an individual or the entire task force to be assigned certain slides so that we can present the recommendations and the timelines to our 24th Navajo Nation Council at NABI, so they have a general idea of the purpose of why we're presenting this and the purpose of the task force at hand. So with that, Vice Chair, that's what I have to offer, and I would like to share with the task force. And if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office if you have.
Thank you, Ms. Yazzie. And it sounds like the Speaker's office is one step ahead. It is appreciated that you're already working on the PowerPoint presentation to NABI. Jonah. So I guess we have our orders to work with Speaker's office to refine the presentation. And I guess we'll look to you, Ms. Yazzie, on when this might possibly be on Naabik'íyáti's committee schedule. And then to address Ms. Khan's concern about putting this on the agenda, maybe I'll leave it to you and Ms. Khan to work with Chairman McGay on whether, I assume that the task force has to adopt the report first before it goes to Naabik'íyáti committee. But I'll leave that to your 3 offices to work that out and let the task force members know. Okay, Ms. Yazzie?
Sounds good, Vice Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're at the point of adjournment. Thank you all again. We had a good meeting today, and Lake Pile issues and all that are beginning to be prioritized. So things are rolling again. Be safe out there. Be careful out there. Pray for one another. And then pray for some rain. We're still in the drought. So do I have Mr. Mose, can you call the roll on the adjournment?
Yes, sir. Honorable Paul Begay Jr.
Paul Begay votes green.
Honorable Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Herman Daniels Jr.
Green.
Honorable Herman Daniels Jr. votes green. Honorable Otto So.
I vote green.
Honorable Otto So votes green. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Honorable Thomas Walker Jr. Vice Chair voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed, adjourned at 11:59 a.m.
Thank you, Mr. Mose, and members of the task force, Chairman McGay, and advisory committee members. Thank you for joining us again, and all those on the call. DOJ, thank you for helping us. And Ms. Khan, thank you for helping us, and staff at CHAT. So we are adjourned. Be safe out there.
Thank you.